So it's pretty commonly believed, especially when you become an experienced lifter, that you pretty much need to choose whether you're going into a muscle building phase or a fat loss phase because you can't do both at the same time. However, I'm here to argue that's not necessarily true, and there's definitely scenarios where you can more easily do both at the same time. And this is when your body's in a situation where calories can be pulled from body fat to help fuel muscle building. And there's three main scenarios where this is more possible. One is if you're a complete beginner to training, your body is going to adapt quickly and you can see pretty good results in both building muscle and losing body fat. Another scenario is if you took a long time off of training, whether you had some sort of injury that had you out of the gym or you just completely stopped training for a long time. Now you come back, muscle memory is very real, and it's way easier to rebuild that muscle than it was to build it the first time. And the last situation where it's much easier to do both at the same time is if you're on some sort of like anabolic steroid. Not suggesting you do this. I would never touch it myself. I'm not here to judge anyone who does, but if you do steroids, it's going to be pretty easy to do both at the same time. But of course, that comes with a lot of health risks as well. So those are the three that are more commonly talked about, but there's another situation, especially when it comes to body recomposition, which is basically where you stay around the same weight, but now you have more muscle and less body fat, so you look better. And quite frankly, this is actually something that's been happening to myself, and I'm an experienced lifter, right? I've been lifting for 13, almost 14 years now consistently, but I'm definitely getting some nice recomp. I'm just noticing the signs, like, yeah, my weight's actually up a few pounds over the last about 3 or 4 months or so, but I'm just seeing physical changes in the mirror. I can tell I look leaner. I'm down a loop on my belt. I'm noticing new veins and stuff that weren't showing up before when I'm lifting in the gym. And I'm even getting comments from other people, including my training partner. I was at the beach with Paul Ravella the other day, and he saw me for the first time in a long time with my shirt off and goes, "Wow, man, like you're looking juicy." People don't typically make these comments unless they're noticing some sort of change. So why have I been able to do this recently? And what's that fourth scenario where it might be more possible? Well, it's if you weren't really taking your training very seriously, or maybe you were doing suboptimal training, you're not training very intensely, and you're not getting much out of your training, but now you dialed it in and you work much more efficiently and effectively. Now you can start seeing some bigger changes. And funny thing about that, the first thing Paul questioned me on was, have you really been dialing in your training lately? And that's exactly what's been happening. I've just been crushing it in the gym lately. I'm performing way better than I have in a long time after honestly about probably 2 or so years of just kind of like showing up. Like I was going to the gym, I was getting my workouts in, but really wasn't doing a whole lot of programming and just kind of showing up and just putting in the work. So a handful of months ago, I decided I need to do something different. I need to get myself more excited to go to the gym. So I hired my friend Ryan Conley to do my training programming. And my thought process was having someone else do this for me will help me be more motivated to go in there and do it and get more excited about things. And it absolutely worked. So that's one of the best things you can do to put yourself in a position where you can both build muscle and lose body fat is make sure you're getting your training intensity up and challenging yourself. I see a lot of people just kind of, like I said, go through the motions, never get anywhere near failure and not really putting anything behind it. But those last few reps should be hard. It should be very challenging. I'm not saying you have to blast yourself into oblivion. I'm not saying that you should be going to failure all the time, but that weight should definitely be moving down by the time you hit your last rep. And so many times it's just kind of like doop, 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 just go through the motions, put the weight down, and like nothing even look challenging at all. And I see this oftentimes too when somebody feels like they're not seeing results and they think they're challenging themselves. But what I say is, I want you to take your last set of this exercise and I want you to do as many reps as possible. It's called an AMRAP. And sometimes like they were doing sets of 10 and all of a sudden for the AMRAP, they get like 45 reps. So you're getting almost nothing out of the training if you're leaving that much in the tank. It's fine to leave 1 or 2 in the tank, but what that actually looks like is very different than what you might think it feels. So one thing that's wise to do is make sure you record yourself occasionally and just see what it looks like. It may look a lot different than you think. In fact, one thing that you can do that I encourage you to do is video yourself and then shoot me a DM with that video on Instagram and I'll take a look for you. If you're not sure, if you feel like maybe I'm not challenging myself enough and you want to get some more objective feedback, shoot it my way. I'll take a look and I'll let you know if you're leaving too much in the tank or if you're properly challenging yourself. And make sure you're not just doing the same thing all the time. If you just do the exact same exercises for the exact same reps, for the exact same sets, the exact same weights, your body just gets used to it and you're going to stop making progress. So you need to make sure that you're pushing to do more over time and progressively overload. Also, when when it comes to your training programming, research has been pretty clear at this point that even when volume is equated, hitting each muscle group multiple times per week tends to produce more muscle building than just hitting them once per week. So if you're only doing like one muscle group per week now, I'd recommend splitting it up so that you hit everything twice per week. Even if it's the same total workload, you'll probably start getting better results. Plus it makes it easier to increase your volume too, which is kind of like king behind muscle building. Now, assuming you're not a beginning lifter and you're looking to sort of recomp, remember building muscle and losing fat are kind of opposing goals. So it's gonna be hard to build muscle if you put yourself into a large deficit. So in this example, you're gonna wanna eat more around your maintenance calories. If you're a bit leaner and you care more about muscle building than you do losing body fat, then you'll wanna eat around maintenance and maybe a very slight surplus. Or if you're just a little bit more overweight and wanna prioritize a little bit more fat loss than muscle building, then you're gonna wanna eat around maintenance and maybe a slight deficit. Because remember, in order to lose more body fat, you're gonna need a larger deficit, and a larger deficit is not gonna put your body in an anabolic environment to build the muscle necessary. It may look like you're building muscle, but remember, you're stripping the body fat away and now displaying the muscle better. So that doesn't mean you're building muscle, it's just showing now better than it did before. And keep in mind, if you really wanna do everything you can to build as much muscle as possible, then you need to be in a surplus to do so. And a more traditional approach of bulking and cutting is gonna make more sense. You don't need to go into a huge bulk. A super large surplus isn't gonna help you build much more muscle, but you're gonna store a lot more body fat. So maybe just a 200 or 300 calorie surplus is enough to more optimally build, but not so much that you're gonna add unnecessary body fat. Now, another thing you can do to help with building muscle and losing body fat at the same time is if you're not eating enough protein, getting that protein up consistently will help you more optimally build while also helping reshape the body. Getting people to eat more protein is almost like my #1 goal all the time. It's the thing that I have the hardest time getting people to do, but it's so helpful between the fact that it does help you build more muscle. It also helps you feel full, so you're less likely to overeat. And it also has a very high thermic effect of food, which basically means that your body burns a lot of calories just processing that food you eat. And to help illustrate this, there's a couple studies I want to point to. One is where they compared groups of higher protein and lower protein. The high protein group ate 2.4 grams per kilogram and the low protein ate 1.2 grams per kilogram, which is about a little over 1 gram per pound and a half a gram per pound. And the high protein group was actually able to lose body fat while building muscle, whereas the low protein group actually lost muscle. So you need to keep that protein up to keep protein synthesis high, because whether you're building or losing muscle comes down to the balance between muscle protein synthesis and muscle protein breakdown. And this is why it's so much harder to build muscle in a deficit, because your protein synthesis is going to be lower and your protein breakdown is going to be higher. And there's also this new study that came out of USF recently where they had female lifters either increase their protein to 1 gram per pound of body weight, which actually caused an increase of 250 calories, and the other group reduced their protein to 1/2 a gram per pound of body weight, which also caused a 300 calorie decrease. And while both groups actually lost body fat, the higher protein group, which actually ate more calories, lost 2% of their body fat versus just 1% of the lower protein group. So it really shows how powerful protein is and why you want to make sure you're eating enough to both build muscle as well as help with fat loss. So I do recommend eating around that 1 gram per pound of body weight. You can go a little below or a little above. I wouldn't go much below about 0.8 grams per pound unless you have a lot more weight to lose, in which case you can use more of a 1 gram per pound of sort of a goal weight. And I do recommend splitting up your protein relatively evenly in about 3 to 5 servings per day, just to make sure you're maxing out the anabolic response from a meal as much as possible throughout the day. Also, bonus tip, in case you are someone who happens to be a vegan or vegetarian, I would recommend first supplementing with creatine. This is actually something I recommend for anybody, so if you're not on creatine, taking this can help as well, as there's no supplement that even comes close to it as well documented and backed up by research to help with building muscle size, strength, work capacity in the gym. And if you're not eating animal products, it's hard to get much creatine in, so supplementing with it can help. And I also recommend supplementing your protein containing meals with leucine, because leucine is the main amino acid responsible with muscle protein synthesis. And when you're consuming a vegan diet, those sources of protein are usually lower in leucine. And there is some research that showed supplementing, I believe it was wheat protein with leucine, showed about the same increase in muscle protein synthesis as is whey protein or another animal protein source. Does that mean you can't build muscle without doing this? No, but again, we're trying to do everything we can here to create this difficult result. Now, as far as carbs versus fat, it really doesn't make much of a difference. However, carbs are protein sparing and they help with performance more than fat does. And I've already explained how important performance in the gym means for this. So again, if you want to do everything you can, then I would eat around 20 to 30% of your calories from fat. And then considering the 1 gram per pound of protein, now all the rest of your calories are going to go to carbs. And as far as the cardio side of things, I recommend more lower intensity things. Even just regular walking is really helpful to keep you active and burn some calories. So if you're just running yourself into the ground doing brutal cardio all the time, you're not going to have the energy to perform well in your training. And that's much more important than anything you do with the cardio. So you want to prioritize your training performance as much as possible, which is why I recommend more lower intensity forms of cardio. Now, believe it or not, sleep and stress can make a difference here. So you want to make sure you're managing stress levels as much as possible and prioritizing sleep. There's actually been some research that showed people who got less sleep lost more muscle than those who got more sleep. Now, granted, it was in people who don't train, so it might be a little bit different, but the point is, sleep more, you're more likely to retain lean body mass, you're more likely to be able to build, you're going to recover better. Remember, it's not necessarily what you do in the gym that determines the muscle you build, it's how well you recover from it, and sleeping is when your body recovers. So make sure you're trying to get around 7 to 8 hours of sleep whenever possible, plus not to mention, you're going to perform better in the gym if you're well rested. But all that being said, I think it's important to make sure you know to not get too tied up in that scale number. Make sure you're paying more attention to how you look. Take a look at pictures. Make sure you're taking measurements around your waist and other areas. Pay attention to other people making comments and things like that that are going to tell you much more of a story than some number on the scale. Because if you want to build muscle, that scale number could even go up, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're storing more body fat. Plus, over the long picture, if you want more muscle, you're gonna weigh more. So don't be too scared of gaining weight if you really want to build muscle. Now, I already explained how important training is, but you may be wondering, do you have to lift heavy? What rep ranges should I use in my training? Well, you're in luck. I've already got a video that covers this, so make sure you check out this top video next, and I'll look at some research to help you determine how heavy you should be lifting and what the different rep ranges do. Otherwise, I think you'll like this bottom video instead. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and I'll see you in that other video.